Namaskar, I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Welcome to Newsnight. As the leaders of leading economies of the world gather in United Kingdom for the G7 summit, India is also invited to participate. In the show today, we track India's priorities on the global stage. Meanwhile, World Bank has given a positive outlook to India's economic revival amidst the pandemic. India's GDP is expected to expand by over 8% in the current fiscal. Back home, important cabinet decisions to empower farmers and increase efficiency of the Indian Railways. With the decreasing number of COVID-19 cases in the country, states have announced unlocking in various stages. All that and more. First, the headlines. Cabinet approves MSP for Kharif crops for marketing season 2021-22. Recommends highest absolute increase in MSP over the previous year for Sesam, Tur and Urad. Prime Minister says step will help increase farmers' incomes and improve their standard of living. Government says it is always ready to engage with protesting farmers, committed to resolve any misinformation on the new farm laws. Agriculture Minister reiterates that MSP will continue to stay. Indian Railways to get 4G spectrum for communication, replacing the current 2G spectrum to facilitate faster communication channels. Government extends subsidy benefits under amended new investment policy to Ramagundam Fertilizers and Chemicals Limited. Major setback for the Congress party. Former Union Minister and two-time Lok Sabha MP from Uttar Pradesh, Jitin Prasad, joins Bharatiya Janata Party, says BJP is the only national party in the country. Daily cases of COVID-19 in the country drop below 1 lakh for second consecutive day. Recovery rate increases to 94.55%. Active cases less than 13 lakhs, more than 24 crore vaccine doses administered. Restrictions eased in various states after improvement in COVID cases. Lockdown ends in Bihar, only night curfew will continue. Jharkhand also decides to unlock. Corona curfew ends in Uttar Pradesh. Unlock processes begin in Rajasthan as well. Restrictions to ease in Gujarat from 11th of June. Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulates IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay and IISc Bengaluru for achieving top 200 position in QS World University Rankings 2022. Assures efforts are underway to ensure more universities and institutions of India scale global excellence and support intellectual prowess among the youth. Monsoon arrives in Mumbai a day earlier. Heavy rains, strong winds slash Mumbai and surrounding areas. Local train services affected after waterlogging on tracks at many places. IMD issues red alert to Mumbai, Palghar, Thane, Raigad in Maharashtra. Meanwhile, hot summer sizzle North India. Mercury crosses 40 degrees at several places. Let's first talk about the cabinet decisions. The Union Cabinet on Wednesday approved the increase in minimum support prices for all mandated Kharif crops for marketing season 2021-22. The increase in MSP for Kharif crops is aimed to increase the expected returns to farmers over their cost of production. Further, the Cabinet also approved an allotment of 5 MHz spectrum in 700 MHz frequency band to Indian Railways for passenger safety and security of train operations. With this spectrum, Railways has envisaged to provide long-term evolution, LTE-based mobile train radio communication on its route. The estimated investment in the project is more than 25,000 crore rupees and will be completed in about next 5 years.
The Narendra Modi-led government at the centre is committed for the welfare of farmers and has time and again taken decisions for the benefit of the farmers and the farming community. In a bid to increase the farmers' income, the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs on Wednesday approved an increase in minimum support prices (MSP) for various Kharif crops or the summer sown crops for marketing season 2021-22. Briefing reporters in New Delhi after the cabinet meeting, Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar said that the return to farmers over their cost of production is estimated to be at least 50%.
मैं धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं किसानों को कि किसान बंधु अच्छी मेहनत कर रहे हैं, उसके परिणाम स्वरूप उत्पादन और उत्पादकता भी बढ़ रही है और अगर टोटल में हम देखेंगे तो कुल मिला के लागत पर 62% की वृद्धि इस बार की जो निर्णय है उनमें हो रही है.
The government has increased the MSP of Kharif crops to ensure remunerative prices to the farmers. Over the years, concerted efforts of the government to increase farmers' income have yielded results. The Agriculture Minister informed more rice and wheat have been purchased over the previous Kharif marketing season. Similarly, more pulses and oil seeds have been purchased over the previous Kharif marketing season. More than 82,000 crore rupees have been transferred to the accounts of farmers. Subsidy on a packet of DAP fertilizers has been increased to 1200 rupees from the earlier 500 rupees. Narendra Singh Tomar affirmed that MSP, the rate at which government buys grains from farmers, will remain to be in effect.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी देश को आश्वस्त किया था कि MSP है और MSP आगे भी रहेगी. उस वक्तव्य के अनुसार लगातार रबी और खरीफ के MSP घोषित की जा रही है. सरकार गेहूं और धान का उपार्जन FCI के माध्यम से कर रही है. दलहन और तिलहन का जो उपार्जन है वो भारत सरकार अपनी अन्य एजेंसियों के माध्यम से कर रही है. इसलिए इसमें किसी को भी कहीं भ्रम रखने की आवश्यकता नहीं है. MSP चल रही है, MSP बढ़ रही है, MSP पर खरीद भी बढ़ रही है.
On the ongoing stir against the farm laws, Tomar affirmed that the government is ready to hold talks with the farmers if they can come out with any suggestion.
जब किसान चर्चा करना चाहेंगे, भारत सरकार तैयार चर्चा के लिए रहेगी, लेकिन हमने बार-बार कहा है कि प्रावधान में आपत्ति है, वो आपत्ति तर्क के साथ आप बताइए, हम ससम्मान सुनेंगे भी और उसका निराकरण भी करेंगे.
The centre has hiked paddy MSP by 72 rupees to 1,940 rupees per quintal for 2021-22 crop year. The highest absolute increase in MSP over the previous year of 452 rupees per quintal has been recommended for sesame. Tur and urad have seen an absolute increase in MSP of 300 rupees per quintal each over last year. The Cabinet also took an important decision regarding extension of applicability of new investment policy for fertilizer production in India. The government is mulling to revive the closed urea units of Fertilizers Corporation of India Limited in order to achieve self-sufficiency in urea sector. This will help to achieve 12.7 lakh metric tons of indigenous urea production in the country every year.
तेलंगाना में रामगुंडम फर्टिलाइजर एंड केमिकल फैक्ट्री है. यह अभी शुरू हुई है. फैक्ट्रीज के निर्माण में सब्सिडी देने की जो नई निवेश नीति 2014 में मोदी सरकार आने के बाद की थी, वो 19 तक जो फैक्ट्री शुरू होगी उन्हीं को मिलने वाली थी, लेकिन अभी 21 में शुरू हो गई है, तो उसको भी ये एक्सटेंड किया है.
In a bid to provide long-term evolution LTE-based mobile train radio communication for the railways, the Cabinet also approved the proposal for allotment of 5 MHz spectrum in 700 MHz frequency band for the Indian Railways. The purpose of the LTE for Indian Railways is to provide secure and reliable voice, video and data communication services for operational, safety and security applications. The Railways has also approved an indigenously developed ATP, Automatic Train Protection System, which will help in avoiding train collisions, thereby reducing accidents and ensuring passenger safety. It will attract multinational industries to set up manufacturing units to fulfill the Make in India mission and generate employment.
4G स्पेक्ट्रम का 5 मेगाहर्ट्ज स्पेक्ट्रम 700 mH बैंड में रेलवे को मिलना एक बहुत क्रांतिकारी फैसला है और भारत सरकार ने स्पेक्ट्रम के बारे में कहाँ कितना उपयोग होता है, किसके पास कितना है, ये करके एक और उपयोग कैसे हो सकता है इसकी व्यवस्था की है। उसी के तहत ये रेलवे को 700 मेगाहर्ट्ज के बैंड में 5 मेगाहर्ट्ज स्पेक्ट्रम 4G का मिलेगा और रेलवे की व्यवस्था अत्यंत आधुनिक होगी।
The cabinet decisions will go a long way in not only improving the farmers' income but also in improving passenger safety in trains and at stations. Bureau Report, DD India.
And Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to Twitter, welcoming the decisions taken by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. He complimented the decision taken to increase MSP of Kharif crops. He said the Union Cabinet has approved an increase in the minimum support price MSP for Kharif crops for the benefit of farmers. This will help increase farmers' incomes and will also improve their standard of living. And Prime Minister further hailed the allotment of 5 megahertz spectrum in 700 megahertz frequency band to Indian Railways. And in a tweet message he said, today's cabinet decision augurs well for railways, particularly in terms of furthering safety, security and efficiency. Moving on, some of the news now. The World Bank has noted yesterday that India's GDP in fiscal year 2021-22 starting April 2021 is expected to expand to 8.3%. Activity will benefit from policy support, including higher spending on infrastructure, rural development and health, and a stronger than expected recovery in services and manufacturing sector. The growth in financial year 2022-23 is expected to be at 7.5%. In its report, the bank has said that global economy is set to expand by 5.6% in 2021, its strongest post-recession pace in 8 years.
The resilient character of India's economy has been acknowledged by the economists and leading institutions around the globe. Now, the leading Bretton Woods institution, the World Bank, has further put its stamp on the strong foundations of the Indian economy. The World Bank on Tuesday projected India's economy to grow at 8.3% in 2021 and 7.5% in 2022. In 2023, India is expected to grow at 6.5%. In 2020, India's economy is estimated to have contracted by 7.3%, while in 2019, it registered a growth rate of 4%, the World Bank said. Activity will benefit from policy support, including higher spending on infrastructure, rural development and health, and a stronger than expected recovery in services and manufacturing. The Washington-based global lender, in its latest issue of Global Economic Prospects, has revised the forecast up by 2.9 percentage points. Activity is expected to follow the same, yet less pronounced collapse and recovery seen during the first wave. According to the World Bank, in India, the budget for fiscal year 2021-22 marked a significant policy shift. The government announced that the health-related spending would more than double and set out a revised medium-term fiscal path intended to address the economic legacy of the pandemic. Following the deteriorating pandemic-related developments, the Reserve Bank of India announced further measures to support liquidity provision to micro, small and medium firms and loosened regulatory requirements on the provisioning for non-performing loans. On March 31st, the World Bank had said India's economy has bounced back amazingly from the COVID-19 pandemic through the nationwide lockdown over the last 1 year. But it is not out of the woods yet. Bureau Report, DD India.
And while global outlook on India's economy improves, India is set to participate in G7 summit as a special invitee guest. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will participate in the summit virtually. The agenda of G7 includes crucial decisions on COVID management and vaccine strategy. The summit will be important strategic undertones as the Quad nations are also part of this edition of G7. Tackling China's hegemonic tendencies may be a common priority for them all. Here's more. The first in-person global summit since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world is taking place this week. United Kingdom is hosting leaders from the world over. The Group of Seven, or G7, is made up of the world's 7 largest influential societies and advanced economies. The group includes the UK, United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, France and Italy. Every year, different countries are invited to partake in the summit as guests. This year, UK has invited leaders from Australia, India, South Korea and South Africa to attend. Between them, the participating nations represent more than 60% of people living in democracies around the world. COVID-19 pandemic, particularly vaccination and global recovery, is expected to dominate the discussion. The agenda also includes climate change, global taxation and trade. Due to severe COVID-19 situation in the country, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will not travel to the UK for G7. Instead, he will attend the discussion virtually. India will seek to highlight some of its regional and global priorities in the summit. On the vaccination front, New Delhi is set to push for European Union support for a waiver for patent protections for COVID-19 vaccines. Patent waiver can enable every country the right to make its own vaccines during the pandemic. The goal is to reduce the barriers to countries producing their vaccines, particularly for the lowest income nations. India opposes the proposed vaccine passport system. Such an international system would be discriminatory to people in developing world, since such countries have so far been able to vaccinate a far smaller share of its population. For India, the summit comes amidst intensifying strategic cooperation with the West. This includes strong bilateral strategic cooperation with the US, France, UK as well as the Quad, and trilateral partnerships with France and Australia as well as Japan and Australia. India has also stepped up its engagement with European Union. India's efficient trade integration with the US, UK and EU is vital. UK in the aftermath of Brexit is also looking for a reliable partner in Indo-Pacific. India has the potential to emerge as a critical node in future supply chains oriented to the democratic world, including in the area of vaccine production. Even though China is one of the largest economies in the world, it is not included in G7. Australia has called on G7 nations to support reform of World Trade Organization, arguing it would be the best way to blunt Beijing's campaign of economic coercion and counter Chinese competition in the Indo-Pacific region. The summit is expected to make a case for complex international diplomacy. While Delhi continues to strengthen its partnerships in Asia and the global south, a more productive partnership with the West helps secure a growing array of India's national interest and adds new depth to India's international relations. Bureau Report, DT India. And that brings us to the issue in focus this evening. We're talking about India and G7, the road ahead. And 2 eminent guests are joining me in the program and the conversation. Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, former senior diplomat, and Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, DG Research and Information System for Developing Countries, that's RIS. Good evening and welcome, gentlemen. Ambassador Puri, if I can begin with you, sir. First up, to understand in the changing world order, evolving global realities, what is the relevance of G7 in 2021 and the manner in which India is now going to engage with them?
Thank you for the question. I think this is perhaps the most pertinent question. The G7 accounts for more than 50% of global GDP. It's countries which have a free market system and which are democracies. And therefore, the invitation to India, along with, of course, Korea, Australia, and South Africa, the invitation to India is a remarkable thing. We participated earlier also in G7 outreach, but this is an invitation which clearly symbolizes India's arrival on the global scene. I think this is something that we in India should internalize. The world has recognized that India is a major stakeholder in the global scheme of things. In about 5 or 6 years' time, we might even become the largest society in the world in terms of population. We are already the 5th largest economy in the world and growing and going in the direction of becoming the 3rd largest economy. Its purport is therefore clear. India is a major stakeholder, and India's participation with other democratic countries is essential for taking the world forward in a rules-based manner. Now, in your report, you mentioned several factors, but perhaps the most important one is tackling the hegemonistic rise of China. And for all these countries to come together, this is therefore a very important forum. Of course, we also have the G20, where China is also a member, and that brings together all the large economies of the world. But the G7 and its importance needs to be acknowledged, and our presence there is something which is of seminal importance and really symbolizes that India has come of age and is an important player in the way the world will go forward.
Right. Professor Chaturvedi, we are also talking about this issue on a day when the World Bank is talking about rather positive outlook to India's economic revival, over 8% GDP expansion in the coming year. Now, in such a context, this revival that we are witnessing amidst the deadly pandemic, how does that take into account India's position on the global stage and the invitation that India has received to be a part of G7 deliberations?
Thank you. Thanks, Shubhendu. I think a very, very appropriate question. If you look at the recent World Bank report that has captured and has sort of shown 8.3% growth in 2021 and subsequently not bad with 7% in 2022 and 6.5% in 2023. So if you see for next 3 years, Indian economy is going to be better and better every time the equilibrium is settling in favor of better policy responses, but also regain in rural development, in health sector, and bouncing back in services and manufacturing. So you find a sort of buoyancy in economy coming in with the new measures that are being taken. And I think, as Ambassador Manjeev Puri very rightly mentioned, this is in a way recognition of the role that Indian economy is playing. But I think at the same time, I must also mention 3 other factors which are of importance. And there, Shubhendu, the first factor is very much Prime Minister Modi's consistent commitment on climate change, and the fact that the Cornwall Summit is in a place where green technology is the USP, and our consistent commitment on climate change is very clear. So I think the technology connect with this summit is absolutely clear. The second important point, Shubhendu, is very much about India's global role in technology. And I think India should come forward in terms of sharing the Bharat Biotech and ICMR-led technology for COVAX. Because if you look at global commitments, I think since IMF is also there, the G7 countries must evolve a global plan for vaccination. Like Prime Minister Modi has shown just day before yesterday, the responsibility of the central government for all the states. It's high time that the world gets together, and institutions like IMF should come forward for global responsibility of vaccination. You look at COVAX, we were supposed to have delivered 238 million doses, but as of now, only 81 million doses have been done. Right. India should contribute in the global scenario, but it is also very important. Your report has already shown about the challenge we have with the vaccine passport. I think global vaccination is extremely important. No one is safe till all are safe. So it is important that without raising further restrictions on border, we should try to eradicate it. And third and most important part is the global tax regime. And Shubhendu, the call by G7 countries, particularly US, UK, France, on 15% of global corporate tax. They are trying to persuade India to do away with what is called as Google tax, but is actually the equalization levy. So multinationals have this responsibility towards the markets where the digital divides are huge, and we need to take measures to bring that at pass. So I think these three issues are extremely important for India's participation at G7.
Right, and we'll try and touch upon these issues in particular. But Ambassador Puri, when you talk about the common challenge of expansionist tendencies of China, whether it's economic or territorial, it's also interesting to see the gathering of G7 and also the invited nations. The Quad nation members are also gathering, the 4 members with their focus on the Indo-Pacific. What opportunities then lie for the Quad nations, including India, when they gather and discuss the issues pertaining to the world and the region in particular?
So, in my personal opinion, this is a meeting which actually cements the transatlantic alliance, something that was frayed under the Trump administration. When you cement the transatlantic alliance, please note that roughly about 50% of GDP coalesces in one side, and no matter what China has achieved, it is fairly small in comparison to what the transatlantic alliance means. Now, yes, Japan is in fact a member of the G7. Australia and India are there, and along with the United States. So there is an opportunity for Quad ideas, Indo-Pacific ideas to be talked about. And certainly the Indo-Pacific shall be an important element. But it is my belief that if you really want to have a global, bring China to the table of rules-based doing of things, then the transatlantic alliance is really the critical element. And if that gets cemented, that much the better. The Quad has its own role. It also has a role because of a geographical proximity in China's case, as well as the Indo-Pacific region. And I think all of those will receive support in this particular manner. Professor Chaturvedi mentioned something about climate change. Now, in my opinion, this would have been a summit to give big signals in terms of the West coming together, and particularly the United States taking the lead for meeting the climate challenge. While we are doing our bit, and in fact doing much more than that, look at our commitments on renewable energy, 450 gigawatts by 2030, which is absolutely tremendous. The fact is that somehow, as of now, the G7 summit seems to have been overtaken by global economic issues, the tax issues, which could have an impact on the Indian economy, our ability to be able to attract investments here, then the entire issue of debt as faces the world. But I do hope that at the leaders level, when they meet, they will give a strong push for global action and leadership of the West, the developed West, which, mind you, in terms of climate justice, etc., most people would acknowledge, and they themselves accept the fact, are those who are responsible for the absolutely largest share of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Right. Also, Ambassador Puri, for both issues of climate change and other strategic matters, how does this congregation also represent the complexity of international diplomacy? Because we know China replaced the United States as EU's biggest trading partner last year. And here we are also talking about strategies in which the countries can come together and address the hegemony of one nation in the Indo-Pacific region. So how do these sort of tendencies work together?
Well, let me put it to you like this. China was perhaps India's largest trading partner in the last few months already, as far as the fiscal which just ended on the 31st of March. So, these issues of China and trading are complex issues which need to be tackled, and we need to find ways, A, of protecting our supply lines, B, of ensuring that China plays by a rules-based order. Now, I personally don't think it's a question of, keep China out. It doesn't really work like that. It hasn't worked like that. We need to be sophisticated in our approach. In India, I see that we are being sophisticated. We are taking a fairly nuanced set of lines in terms of action so that our economy continues to remain benefited, yet we protect ourselves in terms of national security and other such issues. So should the West. But I believe if there is transatlantic getting together, the pressures on China to be part of a rules-based order and be more careful in terms of what it wants to do in terms of its hegemony would be perhaps the greatest. The Quad also has a role to play, and it will play a role. I think these are the particularly important issues, and if the G7 coalesces together, it adds also a tremendous amount of momentum to the G20, in which we are members, also China is a member. Do remember, of course, that there are some other issues also for the G7 which are important. For many years, the G7 had been expanded to the G8, including Russia. And then they removed Russia after the Crimean takeover by Russia. So for many of these countries, actually Russian hegemonistic and Russian actions continue to remain very important, and politically I think they will be particularly important in terms of the way the transatlantic gets together. We sitting where we are, for us of course China, Indo-Pacific is particularly important, but do remember they are in a real sense of the term a conglomeration around the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. Professor Chaturvedi, in your intervention, you spoke about various issues related to WTO, also international taxation that remain important. The decisions taken at G7 impact the developing countries as well. There's been some inputs coming in talking about historic deal on taxing multinational companies in the countries where they operate. What are the implications for India and the developing countries in this?
Shubhendu, two things are absolutely clear. One, there would be nudging for a global basic tax rate, so minimum 15%. That would, in a way, would be advantageous for developing countries, because what would get squarely addressed would be the tax havens. And not only India, but several developing countries and least developed countries face all the sort of illicit financial flows heading towards these tax havens. In India, from 2014 legislation onwards, when we tried for black money, the illicit financial flows and their destinations have become far more transparent and accountable. But this is a major issue for developing countries. So first would be this advantage. But the downside is, as I said in the beginning, the caveat may come in terms of addressing the equalization levy, which is more in terms of 2% to non-resident entities in India, which are earning here and would have to pay 2%. So there might be some enhanced pressure on India. But I think the larger side, Shubhendu, which I would like to re-emphasize, is the point that corporate tax is fine, but the world is grappling with this huge recession across several countries. And with lockdown and limited trade, we are facing huge challenge. So at this point, it is required that it would be in interest of all countries to have global vaccination program, the cost of which probably would be lesser than what the economy would be paying. So I think at this stage, instead of focusing too much on corporate tax, the focus should be on global vaccination program through expanded windows of the International Monetary Fund.
Right there. Professor Chaturvedi, Ambassador Puri, thanks very much for joining us in Newsnight and sharing your perspective. Moving on, daily cases of COVID-19 in the country dropped below 1 lakh for the second consecutive day. The recovery rate has increased to 94.55%. Active cases are less than 13 lakhs. It's more than 24 crore vaccine doses have been administered, more importantly. Meanwhile, restrictions have been eased in various states after improvement in COVID cases. Lockdown is ended in Bihar. Only night curfew will continue. Jharkhand has also decided to unlock. Corona curfew ends in Uttar Pradesh and the unlock process has begun in Rajasthan as well. Restrictions are also going to ease in Gujarat in the coming days.
With the decreasing number of COVID-19 cases in the country, the states have announced progressive and gradual unlocking, focusing on the mantra of Jaan Bhi Jahan Bhi, that is, focusing on well-being with an opportunity to earn a livelihood. But as the rules are being relaxed, people are thronging outdoors, flouting COVID norms, which can prove rather dangerous. To avoid yet another surge, it is necessary to follow proper corona behavior. With the coordinated efforts of centre and states and adherence to COVID-appropriate behavior, India overpowered the surge in the country and less than 1 lakh new cases have been reported for 2 consecutive days. 92,596 daily new cases were registered in the country during the last 24 hours. The number of active cases of COVID-19 is continuously decreasing. The number of active cases fell to 12,31,415. For the 9th consecutive day, this number is less than 20 lakh. The total number of active cases in India has come down by 72,287 in the last 24 hours. This is only 4.23% of the total COVID positive cases in the country. Also, for the 27th consecutive day, the daily number of people recovering from the disease is more than the daily new cases. In the last 24 hours, 1,62,664 people have recovered from the disease. The national recovery rate has also improved to 94.55% and it is increasing continuously. In Bihar, as the rules of lockdown were relaxed and shops started opening, people are gradually returning to work.
आज से लॉकडाउन खत्म हुआ है तो एक उम्मीद जगह है कि हम लोग का जो मार्केट पहले से ठंडा हो चुका था या हम लोग को रिस्पांस अच्छा नहीं मिल रहा था, अब हम लोग को हल्का हल्का उम्मीद है कि हमारा मार्केट हल्का हल्का पकड़ेगा.
In Karnataka, unlock process will begin from June 14 in 5 phases. In Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh Education Minister Vishwas Sarang launched a special vaccination camp for the employees working at shops.
भोपाल के बाजारों में जितनी दुकान है उनके दुकानदार और उनमें काम करने वाले कर्मचारी वैक्सीन लगवाए, उसके लिए एक विशेष अभियान हमने शुरू किया है. टीका लगवाओ और बाजार खुलवाओ, उसकी आज शुरुआत की है. भोपाल के विभिन्न मार्केट में हम इस तरह के कैंप लगा रहे हैं जिसमें लोगों को मुफ्त में हम वैक्सीन से जोड़ रहे हैं.
In Jharkhand, Disaster Management Authority, chaired by Chief Minister Hemant Soren, has decided to start the process of Unlock 2 in the state.
23 जिले हैं जिसमें जो पूर्व की भांति 23 जिले में जो चीज़ें खुल रही थी, खाली उसमें ये सैलून वगैरह बढ़ा है और बाद बाकी सभी चीज़ें यथावत हैं. ठीक है. और एक जिला जो है जमशेदपुर में 2 बजे तक ही खोला जाएगा.
Meanwhile, the unlock process will also begin in Gujarat from 11th June 6 p.m. onwards. Hotels and restaurants in the state will be allowed to operate with 50% sitting capacity from 11th to 26th June from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. In the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha inaugurated the 500-bed DRDO COVID hospital, while in Uttar Pradesh, Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath held a meeting with the officials of Team 9 in Lucknow.
हम लोगों ने यह भी व्यवस्था की कि कोई भी यानी कोरोना के संक्रमण की चेन को हर एक स्तर पर हम रोक सकें, और उत्तर प्रदेश का यह मॉडल देश के अंदर हिट रहा और देश ने इसको हाथों हाथ लिया. उत्तर प्रदेश ने इस दौरान कई नए कार्य किए जिसको अलग अलग स्तर पर मान्यता मिली.
CISF had set up a control unit in Delhi to extend a helping hand to COVID positive patients. From hospitalization to corona discharge, full support was given by this unit. On the nationwide vaccination front, the total number of doses of COVID-19 vaccine given in the country has exceeded 23.9 crores. To get vaccinated, it is mandatory to register on CoWIN app. Now the government, in an important decision, has provided an opportunity to rectify any wrong information that was inadvertently filled during the registration process. Now, name, date of birth and gender information can be corrected. However, the details can be updated only once. Bureau Report, DD News.
Let's look at some other stories now. In a major setback to the Congress party, former Union Minister and two-time Lok Sabha MP from Uttar Pradesh, Jitin Prasad, has joined Bharatiya Janata Party. Jitin said his family has been associated with the Congress for 3 generations, but added that he was not able to work for the people there anymore, expressing faith in leadership of Prime Minister Modi.
What was being debated in the political corridors since the general elections in 2019 finally came to the fore on Wednesday. The political pitch in Uttar Pradesh took a major turn as former Union Minister Jitin Prasada joined the BJP in New Delhi. Jitin, considered the part of Congress leader Rahul Gandhi's core team, joined the BJP in presence of senior leader and Railway Minister Piyush Goyal. Upon joining, Jitin said that his family has been associated with the Congress party for the last 3 generations, but added that he was not able to work for the people there. He further expressed faith in the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
आज कोई इस देश में असली माने में कोई राजनीतिक दल है जो संस्थागत इंस्टीट्यूशनल दल है, वो भारतीय जनता पार्टी। बाकी दल तो व्यक्ति विशेष और क्षेत्र के हो गए, मगर राष्ट्रीय दल के नाम पे अगर आज भारत में कोई दल है तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी।
मुझे विश्वास है कि इनके आगमन से पार्टी को भी बल मिलेगा और जितेंद्र प्रसाद जी को देश सेवा, समाज सेवा के लिए एक अच्छा मौका मिलेगा।
Jitin also met BJP President JP Nadda and Union Home Minister Amit Shah after formally joining the party. Jitin's leaving the Congress is a huge loss to the party as political commentators view him as a popular and young leader. It is now clear that the core team of Rahul Gandhi is fast disintegrating. The first major leader to join the BJP from the team was former Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia. His switchover not only caused a loss of face to the Congress party but also led to the fall of Kamal Nath government in Madhya Pradesh.
मुझे विश्वास है कि आने वाले समय में इस भारतीय जनता पार्टी का कमल का फूल का झंडा को पूर्ण रूप से आगे करने में उनका पूरा योगदान है.
The trouble, however, does not seem to be ending. Another Team Rahul member, Sachin Pilot, has been complaining recently that the promises made by the High Command for addressing his grievances have not been met. Sachin Pilot had revolted against the Rajasthan government with his supporting MLAs but was later pacified by the Congress party to return back. How and when rumblings of dissatisfaction translate to rebellion or loss of a leader, Congress knows it better than any other party given the bitter experiences of recent past. Well, Congress's loss is definitely BJP's gain. With inputs from Rajesh Raj in New Delhi, Bureau Report, DD News.
3 Indian universities have achieved top 200 positions in QS World University Rankings 2022. IISc Bengaluru ranked number 1 in the world for research. QS Simmons Global Higher Education Analyst has today released the 18th edition of the world's international university rankings. IIT Bombay has secured the 177th rank. IIT Delhi is at 185th rank and IISc Bengaluru has secured 186th rank in universities rankings. Congratulating these institutions, Union Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank said, India is taking a leap in the field of education and research and is emerging as Vishwaguru. He said initiatives such as the National Education Policy 2020 Institutes of Eminence are instrumental in ranking our colleges and institutes globally. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated all the 3 universities who have achieved rankings in the top 200 positions in the world ranking. In a message, he said, congratulations to IISc Bangalore, IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi. Efforts are underway to ensure more universities and institutions of India scale global excellence and support intellectual prowess among the youth. Let's now look at some more news and updates from across the country in National Wrap. A BJP delegation in Kerala on Wednesday met Governor Arif Mohammad Khan and submitted memorandum seeking his intervention against LDF government's alleged abuse of police machinery to tarnish the BJP's image. The Central Bureau of Investigation has filed a case against Gautam Thapar, founder of Avantha Group, and others for allegedly defrauding Yes Bank to the tune of 466 crore rupees. CBI conducted searches at several locations, including premises of Thapar. Delhi police has arrested 11 accused, including a Tibetan woman and 2 CAs for duping 5 lakh people of rupees 150 crore in 2 months through a Chinese mobile app. The police recovered 97 lakh rupees in cash and 11 crore rupees deposited in banks from the accused. Some weather update now. Monsoon arrives in Mumbai a day earlier than usual. Heavy rains in Mumbai and surrounding areas with strong winds. The local train services have been affected after severe waterlogging on many tracks at different places. IMD meanwhile has issued red alert to Mumbai, Palghar, Thane and Raigad in Maharashtra. Meanwhile, hot summers sizzle in North India. Mercury has crossed 40 degrees at several places already.
Normal life was disrupted due to severe waterlogging after heavy rains lashed Mumbai. Severe waterlogging was everywhere including Andheri, Sion, Malad and King's Circle. The expressway came to a standstill due to jam, while heavy rain also put a brake on trains. According to the Meteorological Department, monsoon has arrived this year prior to the average arrival date in Mumbai.
And the reason for this kind of rainfall is mainly because of the strengthening of the westerlies in the Arabian Sea. A lot of strengthening has been happening at 850 HP, that is about 1.5 kilometer height.
Local train services were disrupted in Mumbai on harbour and central lines. The local train services between Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj terminals and Vashi on the harbour line were suspended due to heavy rainfall. Traffic signals were reported in different parts of Mumbai, including at Eastern Expressway Chembur as a result of the heavy rainfall.
बारिश बहुत आने के बाद 3-4 घंटा तो मुंबई में पानी कहीं जगह में रह सकता है, लेकिन जब ये हाई टाइड खत्म होती है, बारिश कम होता है, तो आपसे आप 3-4 घंटे में वापस जो पानी जाना चाहिए जिस जगह में, उधर चला जाता है।
43 मिनट को हाई टाइड था और जैसे आईएमडी ने फोरकास्ट किया था वैसे हेवी टू हेवी रेनफॉल आज सुबह 7 बजे से 2 बजे के बीच में सायन एरिया में 183 mm का जो है रेनफॉल हुआ है और चुनाभट्टी में 213 mm का रेनफॉल हुआ है, तो पूरे के पूरे सिटी एरिया में ये जो है पानी भर गया है।
Meanwhile, Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray visited the Disaster Management Cell of Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai to take stock of the situation in the city. Due to southwest monsoon, the coastal areas of Maharashtra have been receiving continuous rain since Tuesday night. IMD has issued a yellow and red alert for Konkan districts for the next 4 days.
9 तारीख को पूरे कोकण किनार पट्टी, मध्य महाराष्ट्र, मराठवाड़ा और विदर्भ के कुछ इलाकों में भी मानसून सेट हो गया है। मानसून का आगमन हो चुका है और अगले कुछ दिनों में कोंकण किनार पट्टी में काफ़ी जगह पे मूसलाधार बारिश होने की संभावना है। आज कोंकण किनार पट्टी के कुछ जिलों में रेड अलर्ट और कुछ जिलों में ऑरेंज अलर्ट भी जारी कर दिया गया है।
On the other hand, scorching heat is gripping parts of North India. The national capital experienced a hot and dusty day on Wednesday. Punjab and Amritsar also experienced the hot weather. Monsoon is expected to arrive in North India, including Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, only after June 15. Bureau Report, DD India.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar continues to engage with leaders of the world on his tour to Qatar. He met Qatari NSA Mohammed bin Ahmed Al Masnaid and tweeted and said, "A pleasure to meet Qatari NSA Mohammed bin Ahmed Al Masnaid. Appreciate his insights and developments in the region and beyond. Thanked him for the support and solidarity in India's fight against COVID." The minister also met Lithuanian FM and Federal Councillor of Switzerland. In tweet messages, he said, "Warm conversation with Lithuanian FM, discuss regional global developments, including Indo-Pacific, exchange perspectives on the world challenge. Also a warm conversation with Lithuanian FM and discuss various issues concerning the region." A good discussion, he also says, with Federal Councillor of Switzerland, appreciated the increased supplies of medication by the nation and discussed bilateral cooperation and said we'll work together to expand its scope. The legislation also seeks to counter Beijing's growing global influence through diplomacy. This is a legislation that has come into being in the United States, but working with allies and increasing U.S. involvement in international organization after former Republican President Donald Trump pulled Washington out as part of the America First agenda.
The US Senate on Tuesday voted 68 to 32 to approve a sweeping package of legislation intended to boost America's ability to compete with Chinese technology as Congress increasingly seeks to take a tough line against Beijing. Senate Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who co-sponsored the legislation, said the United States spends less than 1% of gross domestic product on basic scientific research, less than half of what China does.
Around the globe, authoritarian governments believe that squabbling democracies like ours can't unite around national priorities. They believe that democracy itself is a relic of the past, and that by beating us to emerging technologies, they, many of them autocracies, will be able to reshape the world in their own image. Well, let me tell you something. I believe they are wrong.
The desire for a hard line in dealings with China is one of the few bipartisan sentiments in the deeply divided US Congress, which is narrowly controlled by President Joe Biden's fellow Democrats. The measure authorizes about $190 billion for provisions to strengthen US technology and research, and would separately approve spending $54 billion to increase US production and research into semiconductors and telecommunications equipment. The bill must also pass the House of Representatives to be sent to the White House for Biden to sign it into law. Bureau Report, DD India.
US President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to hold their June 16 summit in an 18th century Swiss villa overlooking Lake Geneva, rather suiting setting for what promises to be heated talks. Sharp disputes over election interference, cyber attacks, human rights and Ukraine will hang over their first face-to-face since Biden took office on January 20th. Putin said that on Friday he expected the talks to be held in a positive atmosphere, though he anticipated no breakthrough. Strategic nuclear stability and regional conflicts will be on table. Biden, who is expected to arrive in London on Wednesday for G7 summit, said that he would press Putin to respect human rights. Swiss police and army have installed barricades and barbed wire around the parks surrounding Villa Lagrange. In the Cold War era, US President Donald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev held their first summit in Geneva in November of 1985 and agreed to pursue cuts in the nuclear arsenals. Japan's foreign minister held talks with his Australian counterpart in an online meeting. Japan foreign minister hoped to enhance relations to new levels between the two countries. Japan's defense minister stressed concern on developments by China in East China Sea and South China Sea. He called for unity among like-minded countries that share fundamental values. Meanwhile, Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne also referred to the friendly ties of the two countries. Discussions were also held on the upcoming Olympics. People in France will be able to enjoy indoor dining and staying out until 11 p.m. from today for the first time in months under a new relaxation of COVID rules. As cases fall and vaccinations rise, in a new phase of program relaxing the lockdown, diners will be able to go inside of cafes and restaurants. Terrace consumption having already resumed earlier on May 19th. The overnight curfew will now start later at 11 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. before being dropped entirely if all goes according to the plan by June 30th. Restrictions at cultural venues reopened on May 19th are also being eased as a sense of normality returns to France with the glorious early summer weather. Mexico and United States have signed a memorandum of understanding to promote development in Central America during Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to the Latin American country. Harris and Mexico President Obrador witnessed the signing of a MOU about the work the two countries' development agencies that they do in Central America. Later in a tweet message, Harris said the MOU outlines how the two nations will work together to address the root causes of migration and help people find hope at home. They both later met for talks billed as focused on root causes of migration. Following the meeting, Mexican Foreign Minister wrote on Twitter that the discussion had been very successful. He added that economy, security, cooperation and development in southern Mexico and Central America were discussed. The Joe Biden administration has been struggling with high number of migration, which has risen to its highest levels in 20 years. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that he anticipates that even if Iran and the United States return to compliance with the nuclear deal, hundreds of US sanctions on Tehran would remain in place. At a hearing on a US Senate committee, Blinken added that sanctions would remain in place unless and until Iran's behavior changes. United States and Iran began indirect talks in Vienna in April to see if both sides might agree to resume compliance with the 2015 accord under which Tehran agreed to restrain its nuclear program to make it harder to obtain fissile material for weapons in return for relief from the US, EU and UN sanctions. The fifth round of talks ended on June 2nd and diplomats have said a sixth may begin tomorrow, though that was not set in stone. The United States abandoned the agreement in 2018, prompting Iran to begin violating its terms about a year later.
Engaged in indirect conversations with Iran about the possibility of a mutual return to compliance with the nuclear agreement, the so-called JCPOA. We don't know at this stage whether Iran is willing and able to do what it would need to do to come back into compliance. So we'll see if that actually materializes. And I would anticipate that even in the event of a return to compliance with the JCPOA, hundreds of sanctions will remain in place, including sanctions imposed by the Trump administration. If they are not inconsistent with the JCPOA, they will remain unless and until Iran's behavior changes.
Turkey has kicked off its largest cleanup campaign to defeat a plague of sea snot threatening to the Sea of Marmara. A thick slimy layer of organic matter known as marine mucilage has spread through the sea south of Istanbul, posing threat to marine life as well as the fishing industry. Harbour, shorelines and swaths of seawater have been blanketed by this viscous grey substance, suffocating life on the seabed. Environment Minister Murat Kurum said that Turkey planned to designate the entire Sea of Marmara as protected area and improve the treatment of wastewater from coastal cities and ships, which has helped the sea snot to spread. And with that, we conclude this edition of Newsnight. Namaskar.